I thought I traveled a lot, 100 countries over 15 years. But for the people you're about to meet, 100 countries is cute to them. That's because they're part of the most exclusive group of people on Earth. Only 300 people have been to all 195 countries in the world. For context, there are more people who have been to space. Join me as we learn how they did it, their favorite and least favorite countries, how they can afford to travel so much, and tips on how we can travel more. I'm Kevin Liu, the host of the Pick My Adventure show. Hey everyone, I want to welcome Rauli Virtanen from Finland today to the show. Rauli finished every country in 1988, back when there was 170 countries. Rauli, thank you very much for joining the show today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be a guest.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you have had quite the distinguished career and travel career. My last guest, Harry Mitsidis, said that you were the most inspiring traveler that he's ever met. And I want to ask you, back in 1988, when you finished 170 countries, what did it feel like? And did you know that you might be the first person to do that?
No, I didn't know that at all. So because I had seen some articles that there was a Los Angeles-based American Travelers Club, and quite a few Americans were saying that they have been visiting all the countries. So I thought that's very possible, and I didn't make so much issue about that. Of course, in Finland, and I knew that I was the first one to do it in Finland, and then here the Guinness Book of World Records. They in that year they printed it there, and it took almost 40 or more than 30 years until Harry Mitchidis of the NomadMania approached me. He approached me a few times, and I was busy, and then he said that you should join our group, and you have been visiting all the. He just wanted to check about my list and the dates, etc. And he told me that as far as we know, I mean, you are the first person in the world, first living person who has been visiting all the countries in the world. And then I mentioned to him that what about these Americans who have been every country, including North Korea, and which I was a little bit doubtful. I mean, that is how come it was possible. And then Harry told me that yes, but they've been including the DMZ, you know, the Demilitarized Zone. They went to South Korea, and then of course there you can say that when you're in the DMCs, and so those people claimed that they had been to North Korea. And so I said, okay, that's very interesting to hear that. So that's how then I noticed, and so far no one has been challenging it. And of course, I mean, me on the other hand, I don't go around and boast that I've been the first person to travel all the countries in the world, because I mean I'm still not 100% sure. Of course, I'm getting older, and people who may have done it earlier, they're probably dead already, and they never been to internet, or they cannot claim that, hey, come on, Rauli, 30 years before I went to the UN countries that were whatever, just 100 plus countries, whatever. So I don't know about that. But definitely, I mean, NomadMania, they say they are 100% sure, and so far, I mean, nobody has been claiming the title, if you can say it. So I'm okay with that, but not bragging or boasting, or it's not a big deal. But of course, otherwise, I felt like that time it was kind of an accomplishment, and we had a small celebration in Bhutan, which was the last country I visited. I chose Bhutan to be the last one because I heard so many good stories about that wonderful country in the Himalayas, quite close to country at that time, and so I wanted to end up there. And then just before that, I went to Sao Tome Principe and some other countries where I was not really reporting. I still have photos of them, and I wrote something from Sao Tome Principe, but from Bhutan Even the magazine sent a photographer with me, the magazine I was working for at that time. So we did a quite a long magazine story about the country. Besides me ending up being there the last country I visited.
Sure. Now, for all the people listening out there, Rauli, you've had a different background than most travelers. A lot of the travelers I've talked to, they travel to every country because of vanity or curiosity, or just just they had time off or they had money to burn. You actually traveled to many of these countries because you worked as a journalist.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
how many of the countries did you go to as a journalist compared to how many did you go just as a visitor, just as a pure traveler?
Yeah, that's good. You said the word vanity, so I don't have to say that. But definitely that what makes a difference, and it's some kind of in these times, when more and more people are being criticized for just traveling for travel's sake and picking up the countries and etc. My defense is that I did it. For my work to inform people so that all the people don't have to travel to those places. They can read my stories or watch my TV programs, so there's no need to air travel to those countries. And then I did it also during the time that nobody felt the shame of flying, etc. And that the climate discussion was not very active, although I was reporting from the 1970s from Western Sahara, where I went from Senegal to Mali, and that time Upper Volta, which is now Burkina Faso. So I did a series of articles about the approaching Sahara, that time the Sahel Desert, and how it's affecting the people there. But to answer your questions, I would say maybe more than 90%, 95% of those places I always I found something to report on, and I used to work long time for newspapers, magazines, and TV. But there were some countries I've been just going recently through my collection of stamps and postcards. I used to send postcards from almost every place I went, and then sometimes I'm joking. Then today's travelers, when you are arguing about the transit stop or 1 hour in a country getting the visas, no, you have to go there and find a postcard if there still exist postcards there, and find stamps if you can find stamps, and find a post office and then send it home, and that will be proof, and keep that postcard.
Yeah.
So I found postcards from, I have postcards from Andorra, from Liechtenstein, from San Marino, and some Caribbean islands where I didn't write stories, and also the Vatican, where I went to see the Pope speaking from the window there, but I didn't stay overnight in the Vatican, etc. But most of the stories, and then the reason is that from the beginning, when I started as a journalist, I wanted to specialize in developing countries' issues, definitely. So my first specialty was Latin America. I studied Spanish and Portuguese before I went there, and I traveled all those countries in Latin America and many times, and wrote articles. And then I was expanding it to Africa and Middle East and Asia, and there are so many common things. So I traveled those countries, and I have press clippings still with me from 40 years ago, or 45, 50 years ago, from Chad or Congo Brazzaville, or very remote at that time, especially at that time, remote places. But I always say I've been very fortunate, and I've been very lucky, and to have this, to have the passport from Finland, and to have publications and bosses who never told me that no, you are not allowed to go there. Signing my travel expenses, the bills after those trips, of course. A lot of those things I did also as a freelancer, and later on through my own one-man production company. But I was very lucky, and of course at that time I must say I enjoyed it tremendously. To meet, to see the different countries and different conflicts and people there. So I've been always curious, and I'm still still very, very curious to find out what's happening behind the next curve. So that curiosity was driving me, and as a journalist, I was able to do it.
Yeah, you've been to 80 different conflict zones: Angola, Cambodia, Lebanon, Romania, Tiananmen, Afghanistan. Of all of these conflicts, is it very difficult to be right there in the heat of the moment with so much going on? Like, how are you able to go into those regions, and how do you get to be able to talk to some of these military leaders in these zones? It must be very difficult.
Well, yes and no. We are always people of my age. We are talking about the golden age of foreign corresponding. That time when journalists were respected, when we had the press card that was respected, we were given interviews from various participants in the conflicts, military or guerrillas or whatever. That was the time. But nowadays, there are many, many things that are making it more difficult. It's getting more and more dangerous. Last examples, Ukraine, especially Gaza, around 100 media workers have been killed in Israeli strikes. Is horrible. And also, same time, then journalists are not allowed to go into Gaza. So we are dependent on the journalists, Palestinian journalists working there. Same time, Russia is not allowing Western journalists to go to the areas they have occupied in the war of aggression in Ukraine. It's becoming more dangerous, and not only to journalists, but also for all humanitarian workers. United Nations is less respected because these people who are engaging the war, they don't want to have outside witnesses. They don't want to have war crimes inspectors there or journalists who can help with the task of seeing where human rights violations are taking place. And then, of course, you have the alternative media, the fake media, and propaganda is very heavy. You see it in the Middle East conflict and the Russian propaganda now trying to affect the Western European support to Ukraine is very much disinformation and hybrid operations, being sending people across the border, etc. So it has been becoming more and more dangerous. We are going through hard times, definitely at the moment. And also the populist policies now we have seen in Western Europe and what we saw in United States and in the Donald Trump's campaign, if you may be talking a little bit about what's happening also there, is just questioning the so-called traditional media, the quality media, and that is very worrying what's going on all around the world, and also in Finland or France or wherever. I mean, it's very bad that requires from the average consumers of media that they should have more and they should be more and more educated in regarding the sources, and when they see something that they find this is really like a click headline that this is amazing, so they should go and check what is the source of this. Is it New York Times, Washington Post, or is it someone we don't have any idea what is the source, etc. So that's in Finland we are quite okay with that situation. At the school already we teach children about how to read the media and what kind of media can be trusted. But people, like in the Middle East, most of the people in some opinion polls, they say they get their news from Facebook, and that is worrying. More and more social media is feeding, and with a even shorter attention span. When you look at Instagram or YouTube, that the clips are very short and often very sensational, and that doesn't give you the background so that you could understand the situation. And one more thing, I'm always in Finland paying attention to that. We should have regular permanent correspondents in those areas, especially Middle East and Africa, so that we would better understand the problems that are forcing to people to flee. Now we have the record number of refugees in the world. More than 120 million people have been forced to leave their homes, and we should understand its conflicts and the climate change and things like that. For that, we need foreign correspondents, not so-called parachuting journalists who are going somewhere where there's fighting and then describing what's going on around the correspondent and then flying back home, not explaining what's been happening in the area, what are the root causes. So that's the problem, to give you a broad, long answer.
Well, I'm one thing that you mentioned that I thought was really impressive, because I've thought about this often, is how do you combat people getting their news from Instagram, from Facebook, seeing short clips that are obviously one-sided. You can obviously create a narrative that you want with proper editing or just showing one small clip. And the fact that Finland, that you said they're teaching kids these days how to discern the news and what you can trust. I think that's something that we could use here in the United States, because nowadays everyone sees a clip and they repost it and they say this is what's happening. They're not looking at both sides of the story. They're not digging deeper. I don't know if that's something that could actually happen in the United States, because we live in an environment now where everything is political, and it's just become such a situation where people don't even trust the news anymore. They get their news from whatever source they want to.
Exactly. So, everything is being more and more polarized, and that's because of the media and social media. Of course, there are many good things in social media. I'm very active in social media because I have, all together with Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X, which used to be Twitter, more than 50,000 followers, and I'm getting feedback from those people, and as long as they trust that I'm very careful that when I'm picking the stories which I'm putting to them or putting my own observations and photographs, that social media is very important. And of course now all the big media in the United States, everywhere, they are putting more and more emphasis on social media.
Well, Rauli, one thing I wanted to ask you was that I started off my career in journalism, and I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. That was one of my goals. I ended up going to 3 different markets in the United States. I stopped at Columbus, Ohio, and then started doing marketing PR, got out of the business. But one of the reasons I did that was because even in local news, every day I would have to report on a death, a fire, crime, corruption, and eventually that became very wearing. It wore me down, and it was depressing. A lot of the journalists I came across, they had a darker sense of humor. I think everyone had their own ways of dealing with trauma. But how did you deal with war-torn situations, the devastation? How did you keep from getting PTSD or depressed from seeing children who've lost their parents or lost their homes?
Yeah, that's a good question. People many times they ask it, and we all are built differently. I mean, I know colleagues who couldn't continue doing these things. I know emergency Red Cross workers who said it's too much for them to see that children are dying in their arms, that they feel helpless, etc. In my case, normally the first aid comes in normally in the field among colleagues. If we have seen something horrible, most horrible, of course, if one of our colleagues has been killed or whatever, then we sit down and we talk to each other and having one beer or a glass of wine and then things like that. So it also happens with the emergency workers. I mean, before they come home and then they go for the debriefing, which is mandatory, at least for the Red Cross in Finland, whenever you come from the conflict area. And of course, those people, they see much worse things than we journalists do. So that's, of course, it affects you. It affects how you see the world, but it affects your attitude. your attitude towards in many ways. In my way, my attitude towards consumerism, and it's always a bit kind of culture shock when you come from those places, countries, mostly they're poor countries, to Finland, where people are complaining about really silly things, and but then you have to accept it that relatively these are the things that matter to people, and not complaining or just observing it on your own way and trying to behave and trying to see how you can be helpful, and in my case, of course, in informing and writing and raising issues about forgotten conflicts. Like today, you don't see too many people talking about Sudan, which is in approaching a famine that probably has never seen in Africa in 40 years, and terrible civil war, and so to make people aware about those things, and so that the people can influence these events the way they decide it suits them better, to volunteer something, to give donations, or voting, and for the persons who they find like that. But so far, in the beginning, in the early 70s, after seeing few wars, I had few nightmares, and I woke up in a situation, and I was pushed in a corner of the room, and then people started to shoot me, and then I woke up. But otherwise, I'm sleeping very very well, actually, too well, and so I don't have those problems. But it affects your general mood regarding these things, and in my case, I'm in a positive way, or I'm a prisoner of my past, that everything I have seen, I cannot just turn away what I've seen. I cannot just start to live luxury life, whatever. So I feel obliged by my experiences to do something. In my case, books and articles, TV programs, etc., to let other people to know what I've seen, and think what we could do. So there's no way that I can suddenly forget what's happening to my friends, like in Afghanistan, where half of the population is behind closed doors. All the women. I have female journalist friends there. I have friends in Ukraine, many countries, in Myanmar, Burma, and they are in touch with me, and I just cannot tell them that, sorry, I'm trying to retire and forget about everything I have seen, and etc. So that follows me all my life. So that's in a positive way the price I have paid for witnessing so many conflicts, almost 100 kind of different conflicts, and being a witness, it brings a responsibility as well to me. So
You mentioned before you've been to over 100 different conflict zones. What are some of the more disturbing things that you've seen?
well, it's always, I would say that the death of children. I mean, I've seen dead bodies, and dead soldiers, dead guerrillas, and of course, and then of course, when you see elderly people being killed or suffering. But the most heartbreaking was when we are talking about the new famine after 40 years. That was in 1984, when I went to Ethiopia, when the Ethiopian government was hiding the huge famine there. And then actually it was BBC who they found these camps of the refugees and people dying there. And soon after that, I went there with a photographer. We did a story for a magazine, and then being there one morning, and then the people carry their small children, the bodies of small children in blankets, in the square where they are going to be collected. And then during one night, there were more than 20 small children that had just died of hunger, or the consequences of hunger. So that's especially because, I mean, war, someone can always find some kind of justification of war, whatever. But when it's hunger, which in a rich world we should be able to avoid. So that makes it even more terrific. Yes, death of children and suffering of children and suffering of refugees, and elderly people, etc. Those are the heartbreaking moments. At same time, I mean, after that, if your next question is inspiring, we have seen so many migrants, refugees who are going through a really hard time and losing everything, and then they are able to start a completely new life, be it in United States where I lived. I saw many of these migrants in New York where I lived, or being it in Western Europe or even in the neighboring countries, which are always taking the main burden of the refugee situation. Uganda is a good example of taking care of so many South Sudanese and Congolese refugees. So it's inspiring, and this resilience of people gives me hope. But of course, I mean, we don't want that people have to go through this hell of being a refugee and then asking for asylum and being treated the way that they are, and the rising xenophobia in the world and all over. I mean, United States, here in Western Europe, including Finland. It's really sad. And then these people who have come to these places, they have to fight against the prejudice and all these things. So this kind of feelings, it makes you wonder why haven't we evolved more, and what can be done.
Yes. Well, Rauli, turning to something maybe a little bit more positive, what's been your most memorable moment as a journalist? I've seen pictures of you with Nelson Mandela, with Muhammad Ali. Is there a defining moment, a most memorable moment for you specifically as a journalist?
Yes, of course, Nelson Mandela is I think he has been. There's some opinion polls that most admired person for a long time, and I spent a day with him quite soon after he was released. After long jail sentences, traveled with him, and the reception he was given in stadiums, huge crowds, and the very humble way he was talking to me while we were recording the television interviews. So definitely, and no bitterness at all after so many almost 3 decades under apartheid rule. Prisoner, then one of the most admired sportsmen, Muhammad Ali. Of course, I had a good day with him in Deer Lake, Pennsylvania, where he was training at his training camps. So he was a funny guy, an articulate guy, and I liked his stories, and that was a good time. Also, I had a chance to meet Pelé, not when he was playing in Brazil. But you probably, some of our viewers remember that he played for Cosmos New York. Pelé played in America. And one day I knew people very well who knew Pelé and who worked for him. And when Pelé decided that Finland was inviting him to Finland, so I took the opportunity, and I was flying together with him from New York to Helsinki and meeting him here again. I speak some Portuguese. Pelé was there, and many, but sometimes there are some journalists who are collecting heads of states they being interviewing, and I'm not into that because I'm very cynical regarding most of the politicians, and I'm not the one who is putting a tie on and waiting with microphone to talk to that and that prime minister or president. That's not my style. But of course, I have talked to various UN Secretary Generals, Kofi Annan and Perez de Cuellar and Kurt Waldheim, etc. those people. But most interesting people are average people, and I meet on the field. And in journalism, you should pay more attention and go to the people, talk to the people, and instead of always getting the official explanation from the parties of conflict, whatever. And that is it's really in a positive way heartbreaking when you go to a poor family somewhere in the jungle, be it in Ecuador or Nepal mountains, when they really welcome you, and unfortunately they will kill their last chicken just to prepare some food for the guest, and etc. So I have experienced this extreme hospitality all around the world, and in my case, developing countries. And I sometimes I'm teasing or irritating the well-off people, telling that the most generous people, they are outside the civilized, what we call civilized world, outside North America, Europe, whatever. When you go to the developing countries, there you meet the most generous people, poor people who have nothing but are able to share their last piece of bread or soup or chicken with you. So those are memorable moments, of course, when meeting people.
Can I ask you if you have any regrets in your career? I mean, I know your
Well,
career is still going and you're
yeah,
still
but it is
actively
still
writing,
going.
but
Yeah,
looking back, do you have
yeah.
any?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, there are people who say I don't regret any. There are some trips I did as a journalist to already some places I had been before, and that were not really headline news, whatever. So I should have been thinking twice before going there. I mean, that time when my children were younger. So when you ask people on the deathbed, they always say, "I regret I was working too hard and not seeing enough my families or my close one, my friends." I don't regret working too hard because the work has been for me a hobby, and somebody has even paid for this hobby and enabled me to travel and to visit the whole world. So that I don't regret. But yes, there could have been more time and less some and of course, I mean, things that I'm sure they were also hurting my family when before Christmas, we heard that Romania dictatorship Ceausescu is going to fall. And then I felt it was not really a pressure from my editors, but I think maybe a common understanding that this will be a big story. That time we thought it was the last dictatorship in Europe, but now we have Russia, Putin, and Belarus, Lukashenko. Anyway, so I left around Christmas, for a few days before Christmas, and the rest of my family, they had to spend the Christmas without me and worrying what's happening to me in the streets of Bucharest, where they were shooting and fighting, those kind of things. Of course, my self-defense is that, well, I've been a foreign correspondent living abroad. All these children were born in New York in the 80s, and I worked out from home. And we lived in other parts of the world. So I've been there basically in the same household, not going to the office, but the trips that have been taking me away. That was the thing.
You mentioned your children, and one thing we spoke briefly before this interview, but you mentioned you had children, which actually surprised me because most of the travelers I talked to, they either don't have children. I think one of the travelers had one child, divorced. But in order to accomplish this feat of traveling to every country, which was not something that you set out to do originally, but it's very difficult on a relationship. And for you, how was it that you were able to go to over 100 different conflict zones, be away from the home for large periods of time, and still be able to maintain a family environment or be able to raise your kids?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the 70s, when I did, well, let's say maybe half of those trips from 1970, if I remember, 74, 75, and then onwards, I was a single, and then my eldest son was born in 1982. So until that time, I didn't have children. I mean, I may have had some. I mean, I had some relationship, but not children in a way when you discussing the family life. And my second son was born in 86, 2 years before I did all the countries. There was not overlapping, and those years in the 80s, and we lived as a family in New York and in London, and I stayed at home except those days. Those times I did. I went for a trip, but I never went for a trip for many months or whatever. As a journalist, it was a question of days or week or 2 weeks, whatever. So the longest travel I did before that, and when I was traveling by land in Africa, etc., before I got children, and then since then I prefer to take them, my children, when they were growing up, to places children normally don't go. So trying to avoid Disneyland, Disney World, and these kind of things. And what I recommend to everyone who still wants to travel in these days is go to Africa and go to African safaris. And we enjoyed tremendously African safaris. I've been with my children to Kenya and to Namibia on safari, and same time combining with making stories, etc. Those kind of things. Even when my third son was very young, I think I took him. I said, "Do you want to go to jail in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia? You can see some people there who have been condemned for murder." And he said, "Okay, let's do it." And he was amazed, and I mean to see. Especially, we went to the women's department, and where the women who were there, they were accused of killing their husbands, whatever, and I'm not sure if it was true, whatever. But then I told my son, that these are still people here, and so I try to, what's behind my thinking is, to get to know, and not, instead of when you travel with children to a big city, you tell your child that be careful, don't go out, and it's very suspicious here, and watch out. And I mean, then it's the better alternative is to approach to these people and see that we all are human beings.
Now, you went to over 90% of the countries as a journalist working. If you hadn't been a journalist, do you think you still would have gone to so many countries in another career?
Not in another country. No, 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 no. Actually, behind all this curiosity about countries is that at the college, high school, before, my Finnish language teacher told me that, "Rauli, your writing is okay." He said something even more, but I'm modest not to say. "Your writing is okay. You should become a journalist." Before that, I was interested in geography already at the school. At the elementary school, I was interested in foreign countries, geography. In the countryside, next to my grandparents, there lived a sailor, Finnish sailor, and who was telling me amazing stories. When I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, he was telling stories from Australia and Amazon River, and I was excited, and I was reading adventure books, Treasure Islands, Robinson Crusoe, those things. At high school, I thought that, okay, I could become a geography teacher, and since that is normally combined with natural sciences, so I was collecting 170 plants. So I've been also kind of collector mind, instead of the required 90 different plants. So I collected 170 plants and studied them all in Latin, at that time. And then I collected butterflies and etc. So I thought when I was still, let's say, I was maybe 16, 17 years old, that I become a geography teacher. And then my Finnish language teacher convinced me. And then I was thinking, okay, how can I combine my interest in geography and journalism, and as a foreign correspondent, foreign reporter. So it was easy like that. And then I managed to get into the university and study journalism and international affairs as well. So that was it. That I don't think if I would have become, if I would be a teacher, then it would have been very limited, because teachers have in Finland, teachers have a long summer holidays, 2.5 months or 2 months, whatever. But every year, 2 months, you just can't travel around and go to those all countries in the world. So no, it's only because of this profession of journalism. The other, somebody is asking me, what would you be if you wouldn't be a journalist? What would you like to be? I mean, that's often people ask me, and I said I would like to be if I would know enough of the medicine, whatever, I would like to be an emergency worker for a humanitarian agency, be it the Red Cross or the Médecins Sans Frontières, whatever, and being in the conflict areas, helping people there, and seeing again with my own eyes how one person can make an impact, at least hopefully saving one life, and instead of when young people, we can change the world, and we can save everything. So in the end, the experienced ones, they say that it's enough, not enough, but it's good. You can save at least one life, and etc. So that would be my second choice if I would be disappointed of being a foreign journalist, foreign correspondent, being a doctor or nurse or whatever, in a humanitarian worker today in Gaza. I would be today in Gaza if that would have been my choice.
Wow. What is your style of travel when you are not in a region covering a story? What are the things that you like to see and do when you're on vacation?
Well, normally, like in my latest book, I have lots of photos. I like to take photos again. I've again improved my camera set, and I'm going to marketplaces everywhere I go. I'm going to marketplaces, and if the place is on seaside, I like to go to the port. I like to go to the fish market. They're colorful, and there you can meet people, engage with them, talking to them. Museums, of course. I wrote one book about Finnish sailors' history around the impact in the world, which is not very great compared to other nations. And then I started to like museums, the sea museums. You have great ones in Liverpool or Hamburg or in European cities and other places as well. Museums of slavery, you have very good ones in Cape Town, and one in Liverpool, and one in St. Helena, etc. Those places I go. And then I, like in Bangkok, a few months ago, I wrote a story about the biggest slum in Bangkok, average people there, and just explaining how the society, how it works there. And my taxi driver in Bangkok, he said he's been there for 20 years and he never dared to go to the slum. And when he was walking with there, he said, I have a complete different understanding about the slum, and what how nice people are there, and what their problems, and what is behind these problems, and etc. So I go to places, and there I didn't see any tourists, like say Farang in Thailand, or foreigner, one or two volunteers who are working for the orphans or for the foundations, which is I would love to see more of that. So I'm avoiding beaches. Definitely, I had kind of melanoma. Spots have been frozen on my face, and my doctor tells me that always wear a cap when you go, and etc. So I don't like to lay on the beach. So just I'm enjoying meeting local local people definitely, and going to villages, and instead, if the city is too clean, too modern, too expensive, be it in Singapore or Manhattan. I mean, it's for only for rich tourists, that kind of Disney World for shopping, and then I'm trying to avoid those places, and going to where the normal people, working people are, folks are, etc. Yeah.
I made a social media post today talking about how my number one thing that I want to see whenever I get to a country is I want to meet the people. I want to learn about the culture, the customs. Seeing the sights, eating the food, going to the restaurants is secondary for me. And one thing that's really helped me out is being a solo traveler. You know, you're forced to go out there and you don't have that crutch of having a friend with you to talk to. You have to sit somewhere and talk to somebody. And that's what I really enjoy. And so it's great to hear that you enjoy many of the similar things that I do. Can I ask you about the countries that surprised you in a good way or a bad way, that maybe wasn't what you expected, or it was, and it just kind of surprised you?
Well, that's a good question. Mongolia has surprised me. It's one of my favorite countries, except Ulaanbaatar, which is one of the most polluted cities, capitals in the world, especially in the winter. The western part of Altai Mountains and Mongolia, and all the I tend to more and more like the mountainous countries, Himalayan countries, and then in South America, the Andes, and those countries. Ecuador, unfortunately, today is a big mess there because of the drug trafficking, and the gangs taking over big cities like Guayaquil. But Ecuador is a small country. It has so many things to offer. The Amazon region, which is also in danger now because of the oil production that's been going on there for more than 50 years, and then Galapagos Islands, etc. Things. Um, well, I cannot say really big surprises. Oman has been a positive surprise to me. I enjoyed it. The easy way, the slow pace of life there. Yeah, first time when I went to Calcutta in India in 1976. I mean, that was. I was shocked about the poverty and the misery of people. I mean, I had been already to Latin American slums and favelas and barrios and ranchos. Calcutta was quite a shock, but in a way, I mean, like one of my photojournalist colleagues says that it's an amazing place to take photos. I mean, everywhere you look around, even actually, he said that even if you're a blind man and then a blind photographer, you will still get good photos in Calcutta of the strength of the life there and the dynamics. And of course, it has changed since then. And same impact was when I went to Bombay the same year, which is was a slum next to the skyscrapers there. So the huge contrast. Nowadays, the problem is, and the problem, I mean, my observation is that, which is in a way that I'm sure most of the travelers don't like, that the countries are becoming more and more alike, and that we should, I'm teasing you to blame the American consumer, American culture imperialism. I mean, there's so many places that if you take photo there, and be it a restaurant or coffee shop or fast food thing or whatever, you can't really see the difference. We need more defenders of the local cultures, but on the other hand, I mean, the power of the American consumerism is so strong, and inflicting on people's clothing. Bhutan is a good example. It's being expecting and not really enforcing, but the local young people, they have to wear the traditional costume, and the young people, many of them are not happy at all. They want to get the latest American jeans, the fashion, etc. And because of internet and social media and everything, places are becoming more and more alike. I mean, there's only North
Mhm.
Korea that is a little bit different, but
Yeah.
that's a sad observation, but that's
No.
logic.
A lot of the places that I've gone to, I feel sad because everyone has Instagram, everyone has Facebook, and they see places that aren't attainable for them. And whether it's because of their visa or their income level or the passport, it's sad. On one hand, you think it's great that they can see this still in a way, but it's also sad because it's not attainable for them. And I definitely have come across many situations where the people want to get out of their country, but their options are so limited. And that makes me very, very sad. Um, can I ask you if you have one favorite country of yours, and why?
It's because I'm trying to avoid this. It's been
Yeah,
always asked me
every
that.
traveler tries to avoid that, but I
Yeah,
have to ask.
you have
I have
to
to
ask.
do my journalistic duty and ask it.
Yeah, in the summertime, it's Finland. Now it's summer here, and it's light, almost 24 hours light, and we have clean air. It's relatively safe, and the food is okay, and etc. But in the summertime, the country where I don't want to live in November is Finland. Also, I mean, I hate the dark and then approaching cold. So
Yeah,
lately. My favorite area, I really can't say, but it's Southeast Asia where I've been staying, always trying to find stories. Actually, many stories. Last winter, I went to Laos. I did a story about the problems with the building of the dams, and that is causing the death of Mekong. Similar story I continued in Cambodia and Vietnam. And I got myself based in Thailand, Airbnb in Thailand, because it's relatively cheap compared to the other countries. The food is great, and people are nice. And but in Vietnam, I enjoyed tremendously Ho Chi Minh City, what I call Saigon. Of course, brings me old memories from 52 years ago. But those places definitely, and Mediterranean is, but these days it's too hot, and I mean, I don't understand people who, when we have a nice weather in Finland, then they go to Greece or Cyprus, and then it's 40 degrees hot. And then the locals are complaining in Spain that
yeah,
the tourists are using the water sources for the swimming pools and etc. So the climate change is
yeah,
changing, and the smart people should come to Finland and the lakeside and forest and breathe the fresh air, and it's not so hot. But tomorrow maybe we get 28, 29, 30 degrees, so it's getting warm as well. But there are many countries I really enjoyed. I wouldn't put them in order, and there's no one country. I like people that I don't think if one should even one should be polite and not tell people that I don't like Lagos, Nigeria. But I hear often people complaining. I don't have any. I mean, I went to Lagos first time in 1974, and I was surprised, but nothing happened to me. But that I thought that this is not the kind of city I would like to live. But I'm sure if you stay there longer, I mean, I'm sure it's fine. Very much depends on your first impressions, depends whom you see, how you are being treated, and what kind of mood you are, or if you are hungry, or if you are suffering from
yeah.
malaria, if you are sick, or whatever. So everything, everything different.
Yeah, or if something bad happened to you, that can taint your entire feeling of that country. Have you ever had anything really bad happen to you as a traveler?
Yeah, if we don't talk about conflicts where I've been threatened many times in Iraq or Afghanistan, or being under bombing as a traveler, 2 times. one was in, if you have to mention countries, was in Panama, and one was in Kinshasa. I had some groups, youths, a couple of youths following me and clearly trying to, or I thought they trying to rob my camera. In that case, I had to find my way away. That luckily there are always some shops or restaurants that are open that you have to find and then stay there and watch out until the people who may want to share your wealth are disappearing.
Your travel story has come to light a little bit more because there has been this onslaught of people who want to see every country in the world. There has been this renewed interest in it. And in fact, when I first started this show last year, there was 300 people. Now it seems that there's 400. And now it seems that there's probably going to be a few hundred more by the end of the year. What is your feeling about all these people who are trying to see every country? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, you mentioned in the beginning of the show of vanity. I think that is a common denominator for some of them, but not all of them. Since I had this curiosity to see so many countries, being it a journalist or not, I mean, I understand that people want to see many countries, but I've been getting more and more having second thoughts and critical. That, like I mentioned, that you have to ask yourself what is your the purpose of your travel and the meaning of your travel when you go there, just to get your name on the list, on the growing list, and then be prepared to be criticized, like especially in Scandinavia, Sweden, Finland. People who are they are being criticized, and we have this word flugskam, shame of flying. It's not that people are appreciate anymore. Some of the Finns who have done it, I mean, they've been getting lots of critique about. And now today I'm reading the news story that flying is actually planes are polluting atmosphere more than we thought. So, but I think this will be over very soon. I mean, nobody's interested anymore. Nobody wants to be the one number 1,000 person to visit all the countries in the world and has to see himself. I would like to see more kind of volunteerism and doing good things and like you mentioned. You shared my views also that go to local people and show photos and talk to local people and bring that culture back to your followers in Instagram. I know you don't get as many likes as you get there when you put your selfie there on the beach that looks similar in 100 other countries in the world. But that's probably I'm a grumpy old man and not fully understanding this selfie culture. You go every country, you take a selfie of yourself there. I mean, what's the limit? That's the hedonism of today. But I love postings. There are some friends, also NomadMania, who are posting. The local people are explaining about the country, what is happening there, and also hopefully the challenges. I read people going to Afghanistan and say that, oh, this is not what it's in the news, that it's fantastic. People are so friendly here and welcoming, be it Afghanistan or Syria, another dictatorship, and not mentioning that half of the people in Afghanistan, the women are in prison. And I mean, we should try to somehow spread that information and on our part influence that things should be changed and not praising all kind of dictators, be there in Myanmar or Syria, whatever. That would be interesting. But of course, there comes now where you draw the line between journalism and then some of the vloggers and the people. They are very good in a smart way, give the information. And it's important because, as I mentioned, Facebook and Instagram are nowadays sources of information for people. I would like to see more of that. And
Well, Rauli, thank you so much. It was a privilege to have you on the show. And good luck with your show in Minnesota as well as Abu Dhabi. In fact, Duluth, Minnesota is where I got my first journalism job offer. I didn't take it. I ended
Okay.
up going to Pocatello, Idaho. I've always thought to myself, I have to go visit Duluth, Minnesota one day to see what I would have missed out on. So you'll have to let me know how it is out there.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kevin. It was a pleasure. Thank you, and good night to
Thank you.
California.
Remember, you can find more information about today's interview subject at pickmyadventure.com and discover more interviews. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on Pick My Adventure. I'm your host, Kevin Liu. You can find out more about me on Instagram at pickmyadventuretraveler, where I let you pick my destinations and travel activities through polls.